Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the very first Cosmic Perspective podcast. And no, I'm not actually going to speak in this voice the whole time. But for real, though, welcome to the podcast. This is the first official one. I've recorded a ton of other episodes leading up to this, but I'm going to kind of chalk that up to practice. And we're going to consider this one the first podcast. So welcome, and I'm sure no one's listening to this, so this is just going to be me kind of working out the kinks. But I promise it'll be interesting, and I should be able to tell a little bit about myself. So anybody who's listening to this who's like, why the fuck should I listen to this guy? You shouldn't. But if you're going to, this will give you a pretty good idea and reason why. So one of the first things that I really wanted to talk about, obviously going to introduce myself. So my name's Kevin. I'm a creative type, so I like doing art, whether it's drawing, music, video editing, writing. I'm kind of like a Renaissance man in that sense. I really want to be involved in all sorts of mediums. I don't ever want to limit myself to one. And I've been told that I'm a pretty good talker, so we'll see if that holds up here. But yeah, this is the first podcast. There's going to be a lot of kinks that are going to be worked out from this point moving forward. But I do want to at least get it going. Get it started, get into a flow, and hopefully provide you guys with some interesting conversations, some thought-provoking stuff that you can take with you, and it'll be like we're just hanging out. That's kind of the idea. Some of the podcasts will be like this, where it's just me rambling, talking about whatever. And then some of the podcasts are going to be conversations that I'm going to have with some really cool friends that I've got, where they're comedians and finance people, sales people, etc. I'd like to find some scientists. So if you guys know some scientists, fucking send them my way. But yeah, I want this to be kind of a mix. So this might at times feel like a Bill Burr podcast from sitting here and just kind of going off on tangents and rambling. And then there's going to be other ones where I'm going to have guests on, and we're going to have just some cool conversations. I'm sure we'll get into some pretty crazy ideas, because anybody that knows me knows that I'm willing to go to some pretty insane mental spaces and think about some of the more abstract ideas about the concept of existence and how crazy this whole universe is. But expect kind of a bit of all this. So this is the boring intro stuff. I promise I will get into some actual topics today. But I do just want to kind of preface what you think is going to be expected of me from these. So thanks again for listening. So one of the things I really wanted to tackle with this particular episode is fear. Because I think fear is something that is obviously universal. Everybody feels fear, but the whole concept of fear and the way that it either can hinder you or push you to the next level. I've found that fear has been something that has prevented me from releasing content that I've made. I've made a lot of stuff that I've just kept close to my chest that I never really wanted to show anybody because of the fear that people are going to criticize it. And I think acknowledging that fear and understanding that that's the reason behind it, and it's not that it's like, oh, I'm scared to do stuff. I'm not scared to do stuff, but I am scared of the ramifications of those actions, and I think everybody understands what that means on some level. But I was scared. I was scared of releasing a podcast. I was scared of what people might think of me. I was scared of family members listening to this and then finding out some more details about me that they probably don't know, which is always a risk. But if you're going to go into the public sphere, you're going to post content, you got to be ready to stand up for what you believe in. So that's kind of what this podcast is going to be, is a way for me to kind of express my thoughts about different ideas, opinions, perspectives, and I'm going to be honest with it. I really am. I'm not going to censor myself. It's just not, that's not in my nature. And anybody that knows me knows I kind of am just going to tell you how it is. So that's how I plan on approaching this. You don't have to agree with me. I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but I do hope that you at least appreciate that I really do believe in what I'm talking about. So yeah, fear was a big thing holding me back from actually releasing these, actually recording them. And in fact, there have been so many times where it's like, I've got everything I need to record this stuff, and I wasn't doing it. So this is a big step for me, and hopefully a big step for the future of my career, for so to speak. So now that I got the fear part out of the way, one of the things that I did want to talk about, especially with creativity, was some of the things that I went through this past year leading up to where I'm at now. So to give you guys a little background, I was living in Florida. I had graduated from the University of Florida, technically in May, but I was already home from Gainesville in December of 2016. 2015, and I graduated in May of 2016. And when I went home, I was working for Apple, and I had been working from home as a tech support person. So started out as kind of a regular advisor, eventually became a senior advisor after getting promoted. And I did that job for a long time. I almost made it to 4 years with the company. And that kind of job was very antisocial. You know, you're talking to people all day, but it's not the same when it's on the phone. And it certainly put me into a bit of a depressive state. I really wasn't enjoying my day-to-day life. I didn't really get to get out of the house too much outside of going to the gym. And my life in existence was honestly pretty depressing. And I'm pretty open about that I did go through some really tough times doing that. And that had kind of stifled me a little bit because I always knew that I could do more, and I always knew that I wanted to do my creative stuff, and that's what I went to school for. And I felt like I was hindered by my environment. I didn't have the proper environment to really get into the creative zone. And I also didn't have the motivations to keep me going. So even if I was able to get something started for a little bit, the momentum just never could stay because I didn't have anyone else there to keep pushing me. And eventually I hit a point where I really couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I can't keep doing this. This is not living. And luckily for me, an opportunity had arisen for me to leave Florida and come to Chicago, thanks to a super awesome uncle who gave me a place to stay for several months, allowed me to get into the city, took classes at Second City and improv, met a ton of awesome creative people, got to really work the creative muscle, and really changed my whole life, honestly. It dramatically changed my life. The environment is so important when you're trying to get into that creative zone. You have to have something that reinforces that creativity and that is constantly fueling it, because it does have a finite tank. You know, you can only fill up so much gas in the tank before then you got to start driving it and dwindling it down, and then you got to refill it again. And if you don't have a gas station in sight to refill it, then you're eventually going to just get stuck on the road. And that's what I felt like kept happening to me. So before I moved to Chicago, when I knew that the moving was coming, so I knew that there was an end date, it kind of gave me a light at the end of the tunnel. It made working the last few months that I did work for Apple like a breeze because I knew that it was temporary, and I knew that at the end of the day, no matter what I did there, it kind of didn't matter. I still did a good job, so I'm not the type that just completely fucks off. I still made sure to do my job and to try to help as many people as possible before I left, but it certainly helped knowing that it was all going to be over soon. And once that, sorry about sniffing, been getting over a cold, but one of the things that really was a game changer for me is like once I knew that I was going to leave and I knew I was going to have somewhere to go, all of this pain and loneliness that came from living at home for a year, not really having any friends that still lived in the Tampa area, it allowed me to take that pain and turn it into a screenplay that I wrote with one of my buddies, one of my roommates, and best friends from college, and wrote a really heartfelt pilot that really, I think, spoke true to a lot of things that I've been thinking and going through and philosophies. and I'm hoping to get that made. I don't want to spoil the show, so I'm not going to, but I'm going to be pitching that around fairly soon. So I have this screenplay that kind of gave me some motivation to help finish before I moved. Finished the pilot, I think about a month and a half into being in Chicago, so it was pretty well along the way before I moved, but we ended up rewriting several things, and you know how it is. You write a screenplay and then you rewrite it and then rewrite it again. So that gave me some motivation. I was able to make it to the city. I had something to work on. I've since written 3 episodes, and I got some pretty good ideas for the next few episodes coming up that I'm kind of excited to tackle. But I had gotten to this point where I now had an environment that was able to feed back to my creativity. Every day I was doing something creative. So whether it was writing that show or going to improv class and being able to really work out some creative muscles, it really was a game changer for me. And living at my uncle's was a great thing, honestly. There were things about it that obviously didn't help with creativity, and that's because it wasn't really my space, so I couldn't really design it the way that I wanted to. But it still gave me the freedom to be in such an exciting city that gave me a ton of experiences that then I could turn into future pieces of work. So this has been a really big move for me, and for anybody that knows me, they know I'm like dramatically happier here, and I'm in such a better mental space. And it really is awesome to have really pushed myself and gotten to the point where I now have everything I need. I mean, I really do. Between my roommate and I, which he will be a guest on the podcast a lot, his name's Joey. Between the two of us, we have more than enough equipment to make really anything we want. So if we want to make digital art, we can do it. We have the iPad and the Apple Pencil. We want to make music. We got microphones. We got, a studio type setup. We got monitors between the two of us. And we really have everything to make pretty much anything. Drones, shoulder mounts, etc., lighting equipment. So I'm super excited. I've never had this kind of situation, and at times, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's overwhelming. Sometimes you're like, shit, I have all this stuff, but all right, now what do I make? So that's kind of been the latest thing that I've been going through. But one of the major parts about this now of having all this equipment is that I was able to design my space. I was able to make a place that I wanted to create stuff in. And I've never had the chance to truly do that. In all the places that I've lived in, like back in college, it was already furnished. And there's only so much you wanted to decorate when you knew you were going to keep moving every year. So that was like a big thing for me, was finally being able to do that here. And now it's like I got a desk with my monitors and both monitors meaning computer screen and monitors meaning speakers. And I got the lighting done with those Hue lights, which they don't sponsor me, but the Hue lights are fucking awesome. I mean, you can change them to any color and set them up with different room schemes, and it's a game changer when it comes to setting your space. And when you're able to design your space in a way that you feel comfortable, it makes it so much easier to get into flow. And flow is something that you're probably going to hear me talk about a million different times, and I'm not going to get too deep into it on this particular podcast, but in the future I'll certainly cover the concept of flow and some of the things that I learned from the books that I read about it, as well as my experiences with trying to get into flow and dealing with the flow cycle. But certainly designing your space is one of the big ones, and the importance of the effect that your environment has on you and the way that you feel in certain places is not always as pronounced as some other aspects of your situation might be. But when you do get to that point where everything feels so comfortable, it has a noticeable difference. It really does. And people, I think, often forget the little things like that, like the little things about how, like, if your space is clean, then you probably feel better about yourself in that room. Or if the color scheme matches, like kind of like a feng shui type thing, where you want the room to really feel complete. You want it to fit a theme of some kind, and pretty much any interior designer would tell you all of these things. Excuse me. So I think one of the major things about being able to finally design my space is that it's allowed me to tap into my next level of creativity. And I think that everyone has the ability to do that. So whether you consider yourself a creative, or you consider yourself maybe more of the mathematical, engineering, scientist minded, that's all forms of creativity. It's just, the word creative kind of is a loaded word in a sense, where people assume that you mean like an artist type. But I really do think creativity is kind of just a human thing. And depending on how you apply that creativity depends on what you might label yourself as, like a subgenre of that creativity. But it's cool, man. It's cool to really feel like you can just get in the zone whenever you want to get in the zone. And I really endorse anyone. Obviously, you got to have the money to do it. But if you have the money to really engineer your space, wherever your workspace is, to kind of get you more into the zone where you're able to not think so much about all the other things going on in your life, but rather to just immerse yourself in the task at hand, I really can't recommend it enough. So that was something I really wanted to cover because lately that's really been a game changer for me, where I come home. I might come home from work at 12, 1, 2 o'clock, depending on the day, and I'm not opposed to doing work that late. If I feel like I'm in a zone where I can do some creative shit, I'm able to do it now. And I don't think that would have been the case. It definitely wasn't the case in Florida, and it's definitely not the case, at my uncle's place, because it was his stuff. But that being said, the opportunity to come into the city and not have to immediately, like live with somebody you don't know, or to all the other aspects of moving that can be kind of a hassle. It was a great intermediate step, and it really got me to where I am now. So super, super grateful of that. Shout out to Uncle Bob and Aunt Melanie. They're the best. Really, really can't thank them enough for the opportunity that they gave me here. So, the next thing that I really wanted to cover, I guess, was kind of the whole format of how this podcast is going to evolve over time. I'd imagine that what I'm thinking of now is just probably not going to be where it will be in even 6 months from now. Because obviously the more you do something, the better you get at it, the more you realize your own voice and your own way of putting a spin on things. And that's kind of how I'm approaching this. I want the podcast to feel organic. I want this to feel like a conversation that either you're just listening to or you feel like you're a part of in some way. And with that is going to come a certain degree of informality and a certain degree of maybe a lack of super defined format. But I will try to keep the solo podcast to either about what I'm feeling at the time or about a particular subject that maybe I've really been wanting to tackle because it's been on my mind. That's kind of how I want to approach the solos. And then the conversations, I want to just be completely influenced by the people that I'm having the conversation with. So if I have a comedian on, we might talk about comedy, but we also might talk about something else that comedian is all about. And so expect each one to be different. And I'll make sure to title the podcast based on what I end up covering. And hopefully it's entertaining for you guys. And I need the feedback. So let me know if there's anything that you don't like, or if there's a certain thing that you really liked, but maybe we didn't go far enough into on a particular podcast, and you want me to go deeper into that on a future one. I mean, this is how we get better. If you're not willing to listen to people and take that information and take it with a grain of salt. I mean, some people know what's best for you and some people don't. So kind of having a mix of listening to people, but also, I know what I want to do to some degree. So, I'm not going to be afraid to tackle those things regardless. But obviously, if something is universally hated, don't expect that to keep showing up in the future. It should be all right. So another thing for people who maybe don't know me, because this is kind of going to be an intro podcast. I promise you, most podcasts probably are not going to sound like this one, but I felt like I needed one that kind of gives you an idea of who I am. So one of the main things that I think a lot of people know about me is that I do impressions, I do voices and characters, and I probably am going to use them a lot. It'll come up probably more organically in the conversations that I have with people, but it also is probably going to show up in these solo podcasts where, I might just be making fun of a person that I talk to or telling a story or something, and I will use my voices to kind of spin it. That's just how I am. When I tell a story, I'm more likely to give some sort of voice to people to kind of pizzazz it up and spice it up. I don't think I've ever heard pizzazz it up before, but it should be entertaining. So hopefully you're a fan of all of my other voices, and I will certainly switch from voices. I will switch from the narrator voice to the sports announcer voice and bring it down to the movie preview. So yeah, I'll be fucking around with that shit. I don't really know what I'm gonna do or how it's gonna come out, but if it feels right for me to use a voice, then expect to hear some crazy voices. But yeah, I mean that's kind of really what I wanted to do with this podcast. I just wanted to give an intro, give you guys an idea of who I am, why you should listen or not listen to me, and hopefully this will be a good intro to my world and my thought processes, and hopefully my ideas that will maybe make you think about something in a different way, because I have a bit of a counterculture perspective. I don't want to call myself a revolutionary just yet, but that is certainly my aim. I plan to kind of shake up the status quo. I definitely plan on fucking with the establishment a little bit, legally, of course. Through I'm a firm believer in the spread of ideas being the bigger change than any physical action. But certainly, I plan on challenging a lot of maybe commonly held beliefs that maybe aren't as based in reality as people think that they are. And I don't mean that in a conspiracy theory way either. Really just kind of like if this is the narrative that the New York Times, CNN, Fox News is all giving you, there's probably some special interest behind that, and there might be something deeper if you just do a little bit more investigation. So that's kind of my perspective. Definitely not a tinfoil hat type guy, but at the same time, not afraid to question the narrative that might be purveying the circle jerk that is the news at this point. Because if you've ever noticed, the news at this point, no matter what channel you're watching or listening to, is essentially just echo chambers for the perspectives that they're trying to sell you. So whether they're trying to sell you a right-leaning or a left-leaning idea, which, let's be real, it's pretty much either center or right. There's kind of no real left unless you go online. That I plan on challenging. And so from time to time, I might specifically call out news segments or news stories. Maybe that won't be in the podcast. Maybe that'll be in content on my YouTube channel. But certainly expect me to question some of this shit, because I'm not a big fan of the groupthink and the blind belief in American propaganda. And I think for people to not realize how much propaganda is actually being spread to them in a given day, or how many things that people might just take as fact. They read it once, they take as fact, there's surface level analysis, and that's about it. I think that's what I want to really poke at. I want to get people to at least just question it deeper. I mean, like I said, you don't have to agree with me, but I do want you to at least look at the facts and maybe not even take the facts as facts, because sometimes they'll tell you that something is a fact when in reality it's really an interpretation based on some evidence, but then skewed towards a particular narrative that the special interests behind whoever's running it is really trying to push you towards. And if you've ever noticed the way that certain articles are worded, there's an inherent bias, like clearly designed. I mean, you read an article about Bernie Sanders and find one that's positive, because even the ones that are positive have something that kind of skews into, well, but he's a fairy tale, don't believe in it, he wants to do good things, and it sounds good in reality, but let's be real, guys. Let's be practical. Let's not spend any money on helpful shit. I'd like us to spend money on more war, and we can greenlight every single war that we ever see. But oh shit, healthcare, college, no, fuck that. We don't have the money for that. We only have money for more bombs. So things like that, I certainly plan on questioning and challenging the narrative. And if you don't like the opinion, that's okay. I mean, you don't have to listen to me, but I'd like to think that even if you don't agree with me, you should at least understand where I'm coming from and know that I'm not trying to trick you or sell you bullshit. That's just not going to be me. I'm going to tell you how I feel, and I'm going to give you the facts. And if you still don't agree, that's fine. I mean, like I said, you don't have to agree with me. But you should at least then think a little bit deeper about it instead of just inherently reading something that confirms your own biases and then wants to continue confirming it. I know that's kind of what Google does, right? You just search something on Google and it'll basically tell you whatever you already wanted to believe based on how you phrase the question. So hopefully I can change that perspective. But yeah, ultimately, this is kind of what I wanted out of this first podcast. Give you an idea of who I am, give you an idea of what's going on. And hopefully some of the conversations I have are entertaining for you. So just give me feedback. Let me know what you liked or what you didn't like. And have a good day, guys.